Hi, Jade.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Yourself?
Super. Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. So it's Jade from Branded by Aquila now.
That's the one.
Fantastic, fantastic. And it's a new business? And it's not a new business.
Yes, no. So it's been bumbling along for 4 years or so. When I started, it
Cruising
was very
along, not bumbling along.
I kind of started just to help people through COVID, like local small businesses, with just, oh, why don't you do this? Oh, I can help you do that, and I get a bottle of wine. And then it's kind of ramped its way up to actually, like, you know, I'm enjoying working with these brands. Yeah, I wish. Yeah. That'd be great. Yeah, it's kind of worked its way up to supporting small to medium sized businesses with their brand and marketing solutions. So yeah, it's very rewarding, I think is the word.
And now it's becoming a full-time
venture. 100%.
It's not bumbling or cruising.
It's definitely
now
not bumbling. It's 10,000 miles per hour at the minute, which is really exciting, and a great community that we're building there with different brands all trying to achieve sustainable growth through effective campaigns.
And where did the name come from? Because we were just talking before we started, and I referred to it as Aquila, and you said, no, it's branded by Aquila.
Yeah.
So why did you put the branded by at the front? Is that to go on everyone's website at the bottom, branded by Aquila?
Yeah. So interesting, obviously we said about the 4 years. So when it started, it was just Aquila.
Yeah.
Latin term for eagle. The idea is that, you know, if you surround yourselves with other eagles, you'll soar. If not, you'll be clucking around the coop. You're not going to get very far.
Yeah, I like that.
And then, but as I've developed professionally through various different things, I've decided that actually brand is the overarch into marketing. The idea is that marketing is how you are somebody on the date, but your brand is the reason that they say yes.
Right.
So then I've decided that actually branding is really key to that offering. So I wanted to put it branded by Aquila, you're branded by Eagles. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, I like that. That's very cool. And there's me, like, when thinking about naming Wave, just thought what rhymes with Dave. So,
well, you can go at it from that angle too.
Didn't even think about anything Latin at that point. But anyway, so welcome to our podcast. Thanks for coming on. We are going to be talking about brands a little bit today, and kind of covering off almost sub-brands and creation of sub-brands as well. A lot of businesses, certainly within recruitment, have created new sectors. They're recruiting in different areas. They've had to evolve their offering into different markets as they've grown, and some of those then create new brands, sub-brands, new company names. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. It's something that you're very well versed in. And it's really quite interesting for me because we've kind of been on a similar journey with Wave, with having kind of products that could be brands and sub-brands. So it's really, I'm really looking forward to kind of getting stuck into this a little bit. So I guess the first thing to talk about is why, or how do you know when you need to then create a second brand or a sub-brand, or, you know, a different type of message that goes out to market? Is it just when you launch into a new territory, or
I think that sub-brands are born out of the market development strategy. So normally, as you said there about, you know, you're already in recruitment, but actually you might be in IT and actually you want to go into engineering or a different target audience, a different market with that. So I think that once you've decided that you've got a different strategy, you then need to think, actually, it's not a one size fits all across all of those brands. So we maybe need to start splitting. And I think if you're an existing recruitment company and you're already serving different target audiences, is it confusing when people are going to the website and seeing that you're across 5 different sectors? Are each of those sectors kind of fighting for a voice? And I know certainly at Murray, before we made that decision to split, it was a real challenge of giving them all their identity and their space, you know, above the fold on the website to be able to say, hi, we're here, we're doing this. And actually, it was being more harmful because it's kind of diluting the sectors that we had. And I guess internally, we were able to put more accountability visibility as well on each of those teams. So we're able to say, okay, you've got your own website, you've got your own marketing plan, you can now be accountable for inputting into that and what comes out of it, which from an internal performance perspective has also had really good results. So I think, going back to your question, the sub-brand thing is really around the target audiences. If you're struggling to find something that matches for all of them, it's probably because you can't do that. And that case, you need to split out, because otherwise you're going to be far less effective in what it is that you're doing. Whereas if you're more tailored and you're speaking to each of those groups, you're probably going to have better results.
And how do you, like, really just getting right into the nuts and bolts of it, if your company name is Wave Secretarial, do you then change the name of the company itself if you then decide to start doing engineering? So then you're like Wave Engineering, or do you have to then drop the Secretarial and just rebrand as Wave and then have sub-brand names after that? How do you kind of, you got to almost go back to the start if you're going to move into a different area, right?
Yeah, and I think that's worth pointing out, that when you bring out those sub-brands, the parent brand isn't necessarily at the forefront anymore. What they're interacting with is the sub-brands, and your parent company is there to kind of, allow the sub-brands to kind of feed off, if you like, that reputation that it built, and give them a little bit of a head start when they're like penetrating new markets. I think if you think of FedEx as an example, so they've got, I think, 6 different sub-brands. So FedEx, but it's now FedEx Corporation, and then you've got FedEx Cargo, FedEx Express. So they all kind of have that addition onto them. And then, referring back to Murray, so Murray is the brand, but then you have policy by, engineering by, water by. And that's how we start to segment them. And then I guess from a visual perspective, it's then how you differentiate them, but lead back to the brand. Because I think, when you're thinking about a sub-brand, they all are very distinctive in their attributes, but they all kind of leverage back to that parent brand. And then there could be a whole conversation around, well, is it a sub-brand? Is it a brand extension? And that's a whole nother conversation, which definitely isn't my remit.
Would you say to build, separate websites? Do you start going down the route of having, the parent site, and then you then create completely different domains with website with where it's just focusing on engineering, for example?
I think it depends on your resource and your costs as well. If your budget is quite tight, the ability to do that is going to be far more difficult. So I think with anything with sub-brands, you need to assess the suitability, feasibility, acceptability of doing that, because it's not just, okay, we've created these sub-brands within those target audiences. You have to then respond to each of their value propositions, the tone of voice. Do some of them like animated videos? Other than, are they more lifestyle videos? So you need to respond to each of them individually. And if we're creating those websites separately, that's just an additional amount of resource and time and costs that you need to provide all of those with. You could do it in a sense that you have the main brand and then they filter off into different sites. So you're not necessarily building different websites with different domains. Your homepage kind of takes a back seat. And then you've got all of your other brands that are technically as part of one site, but to the customer, they look like very different websites. So that's a way that you can kind of reduce the costs. And from a build perspective, you can very much template the websites the same, again, reducing on costs and time and resource. And it's a case of you're just tailoring the messaging and the imagery and kind of the brand guidelines within those.
It's quite interesting when you talking about they follow the same template. Would you ever have a sub-brand that has kind of a completely different values or completely different look and feel? Or would you typically try and run a theme from the parent? Like you said, you mentioned FedEx earlier. Like, I don't know those other brands, and maybe that's on purpose. But I wonder if they follow the same kind of corporate brand guidelines, or it's a completely different sort of look and feel. What do you think would be the route to go down?
So my preference is that they have a thread going through all of them that connects them. Another brand that I work with is called Yummies, and they've now got 3 sub-brands that I built with them from scratch. Yummies Catering, Yummies Office, Yummies Cakes, and they all have the same bold look and feel to them, but equally within those sites, they have a very different offering. One adopts like a bright pink, one is more around the orange, one is kind of like multicoloured and kind of wacky imagery, but the logos, they all follow the same style and the same structure. If you look at Virgin, for example, they've got over 20 different sub-brands, brand extensions, whatever it is that he wants to call them. I find that more difficult for him to be able to leverage reputation from, because they use different typography for Virgin. They don't all have the red in them. The key ones like Virgin Trains, Virgin Experiences, Virgin Atlantic, they do. But if you look at all of the sub-brands that they have, there's a lot of them which look completely unrelated. If anything, you would think maybe it's a fake or a rip-off version from the Virgin brand.
Yeah.
And I think, personally, a lot of my background is in like premium positioning as well. So I like the attention to detail, the quality, making sure that everything is on point. And I like the fact that when you have sub-brands that can clearly leverage from the parent brand, you have slightly more benefits, I think.
A lot of the way that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way in which these sub-brands are created in some instances you've got a recruitment agency that is operating in one certain market, and for whatever reason, market conditions, the economic conditions, that market starts to shrink or get smaller or whatever, and so then there's another market that then is starting to grow. So the obvious most recent example is kind of AI. You may have an IT recruitment business that specializes in hardware engineers, and yet AI becomes the new hot industry. So they would then go, right, we haven't got any hardware roles to work on, let's go and create an AI desk. And it kind of starts to grow from there to the point where you would then go, right, let's rebrand the company to whatever it is, AI. That sort of process feels to me for a lot of smaller business, they may not have they might not have that much marketing capability or resource. What would you then say to those types of companies that suddenly have launched as a bit of a test, and that's then suddenly started to grow, that don't have a marketing department or don't have money? What would you say to those companies, and how would you advise them to then grow that brand or that sub-brand, or create that sub-brand?
I think it's still possible to be able to do that. I think where you need to then have maybe slightly more control, if you like, so obviously it's very exciting to bring out a new brand, is over the marketing plan. You can't do everything, because you would just spread yourself too thinly and it will all just be a bit rubbish. So I think when you've got your sub-brand, think, actually, what are the key channels that we want to be in? What are our key focuses? And make sure that you're really strict on following that plan. Don't have too much strategic drift within that, because otherwise you'll start to reduce the quality. And at the point when you start to say, okay, we're excelling in this, this and this, you can then start to add to that plan, add to your channels, and hopefully at that point you're proving a better return, so you can then invest a little bit more in marketing support. So I think it's definitely doable, but it's trying to have the control within yourself to say, okay, we can't do everything at once. What is it that we maybe know that works? Thinking about the parent brand, let's give that a go. And maybe you might have one channel which is slightly new, but you've learned kind of through data and through your own kind of market knowledge that actually that could be a good one to explore. Keep assessing, reviewing and measuring. That's going to be really important certainly for smaller businesses that have a much smaller budget, and assessing the return on that more carefully. And return doesn't just mean monetary return. If they're launching a new sub-brand, they might be looking, they'll have activities at the top of the funnel, and then your metrics there are going to be, impressions, reach. And as we drop into the middle stage, that's going to be more around engagement rate. So rather than thinking, okay, we've launched a sub-brand, what's the pound for pound? You're going to have to look at other forms of return. So I think that would be my advice to them in the first instance.
So what would those metrics that you'd look at in it's not monetary.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it will be monetary
course,
as a primary thing. That's what I'm sure most business owners will go, well, how many placements have we made and what the fees like? But what else then? You just touched on a couple of those things. So I'm just trying to pull those out. What should they be looking at after they're looking at the fees? How many people are visiting the site or looking at that page? Or?
Yeah, so if you've got a new website, you obviously want to be making sure that all of your analytics is set up. Maybe you've got email automation as well. You want to see where that traffic is coming from. If you're spending a lot of money on PPC, but it's not really yielding results, turn it off. Reallocate that spend to somewhere else, because you can't just have money burning. And I think when I say about the monetary side of it, that's certainly my angle on it. If you're reviewing and measuring, you're seeing that it's not yielding results, then actually you need to reallocate spend or just turn it off entirely. And that's okay to do that. Certainly in the phase when you're exploring a new target audience and trying to understand them a little bit more. And then at the point where you've got a job on and you've made a fee with them, it's then tracking back, okay, what touch points is it that they went through? What was the journey? Actually, we're getting far more through email automation than we are through LinkedIn. Okay, so we need to be doing more in the email automation space. LinkedIn's fine, but let's not put more investment to that. So it's monitoring where the wins are coming from and what touch points are having an influence. And then you can attribute, okay, we've just made a 10 grand placement there, and we would attribute it. You've got different attribution models. Obviously, last touch is always easier to do. And unfortunately, a lot of this does rely on input from sales consultants to be able to put things into the CRM system and track. But certainly if you're a smaller team, having a conversation with your consultants and saying, okay, when you next speak to them, can you just ask them? They put on their email inquiry, social. Well, what does that mean? Did they see, the podcast that we did last week? Just have that conversation with them. And I think getting your consultants to understand the purpose behind that, it's not just marketing wants to know. It's actually, if you tell us that it was the ebook that we published last week that's kind of yielded their interest and that's what's made them got in touch, then we can do more of that, which is going to generate more leads for you, which is more money in your pocket. So I think explaining to them the benefits behind why we need to understand the touch points and where it is that they're coming from is just as important as anything else.
I think that's a really good point, because I think often the struggle between marketing within a recruitment business and the consultants is quite real, in that consultants typically just want to do their job and speak to candidates, speak to clients, make placements, and trying to get their feedback from them in terms of where those candidates came from, where the consultants where the clients came from, where the leads came from, is probably they'll see that as an administrative task. But I think maybe reshaping it as, if we find out what works, we'll get you more leads, we'll get you more jobs, we'll get you more placements, therefore you'll make more commissions. So it's in your interest to try and tell us where these have come from. So I think that's a really good point to try and just communicate to them, so it's not just, I've got to fill in the source of where this lead.
And I think a lot of that in I call it a marketing relationship, sales and marketing. So I think a lot in that relationship isn't just marketing asking for, can we have information on this, and explaining why it's important, but it's also looking at other areas that marketing improve. So if administration, for example, is one of the key things holding them back, I've got all this admin to do, I'm hardly spending any time canvassing or doing any BD activity, then as marketers, we can also look at the tech stack and the processes around that and say, okay, we found this tool that's going to be able to save you X. In return for me saving you X amount of time, not only can you do more BD, but while you're doing that business development, you can then feed back data to us. And it's kind of this circle that just continues to loop round. So I think getting that shared relationship is really, really important. And certainly in previous businesses, that's where I've really tried to focus my efforts, is on bringing the two together. And at the point where one person gets it and they say, oh, actually, this is making me some additional money, they're like, bees to honey. They're like, oh, can I have some more of that? Oh, I've just seen what he's doing over there. Can you do that for me as well? And then before you know it, everybody's really brought into marketing. And certainly on that sub-brand journey, if they can understand what's working and that it's driving them more revenue, they're going to be more brought in to help you.
I can feel a warmth of glow from these guys here about marketing and trying to get more from sales going back each way. So it's getting warm here because they're obviously very pleased about that.
Yeah.
How many sub brands could a company have then? As a sort of opportunist recruiter, you go, right, engineering, that's got big, AI, that's got big, life sciences, that's got big.
Yeah.
So do you set up a sub brand for every different sector that you start working in? Could do, but how many could you feasibly have if you were, say, a 20 strong recruitment business?
Mm-hmm. You need to be sensible. Going back to the fact of acceptability.
Why? Sensible. We can place loads of different roles. We've got loads of jobs in all these different sectors. Let's not be sensible. Let's go for it.
But can you? If you break into, say, 20 different brands and you're a company of 20 people, can you genuinely service all of those different areas? And I'm talking from a marketing perspective. Okay, you may have resources to deliver on those roles, and that's a positive problem, of course. But actually, is it sustainable? Are your marketing strategies sustainable to be able to grow with those brands? Because actually, if you find that your first sub-brand needs more email automation, and then you've got another one over there, and okay, that's explainer videos, and then this one's podcast, and hold on, that target audience doesn't like the tone of voice of that target audience, everyone's just going to be panicking and flapping. And then as a result, certainly candidates will probably be confused, and your clients will just be like, oh, I don't know what brand it is that I'm dealing with. Am I that one? Am I that one? So I think if you're that size company, you need to be sensible about what you can allocate in terms of resource and cost, because you'll end up spreading yourself so thinly that they're all just performing really mediocre, if at all. Or you'll have brands that just completely drop off. And then that's very awkward as well, because somebody might say to you, oh, didn't you have that other brand? So, oh, yeah, it just kind of died
We don't
to
talk
death.
about that anymore.
So I think there's also, while there's a lot to leverage from a parent brand, it can also work the other way, that if you've got sub-brands that are really underperforming, that can negatively impact the brands that are doing well, or that great reputation that you've built up as a parent brand. So I think you need to be sensible when you're looking at it. Tech stack is another thing. The tech and tools that you have, do they enable you to build up sub-brands easily or not? Some might say that, okay, you need to pay more money to have them in separate accounts. Others, it might be more easier to segment your data and to have different templates across the different brands. So that's something else that you need to look at. Is your business ready to support multiple brands? Is that 2, 5 or 10? And flip it on its head.
Yeah, I guess, do you also not really want one sub-brand to dramatically outperform some of the others? Because then if one starts to do too well and the others start to drop off, the temptation will be to invest more in the one that's doing well, less on the one. And then you get that scenario where they say, didn't you used to do, whatever? And you go, yeah, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably contradict myself here. If one's performing really well, brilliant. I think where the difference is from what I explained before is if you've got some which are underperforming. If you've done your analysis correctly, you've done your competitor analysis, you've done your digital audits, your value propositions, if you've gone through that entire process and it says that it works, it should work. Your marketing plan and everything around that should be able to be executed perfectly. So if you've got one that is performing really well and the others not so much, then I would say that you need to look at, okay, why is this one performing really well? Because these ones went through exactly the same process to be established, so they should be performing just as well. And maybe it's a case that you just have to tweak processes, channels, how it is that this brand is running to be able to help them to perform, because it's not that one size fits all. So I think providing that you've done that legwork in the beginning, which is really intense and does require a lot of time and effort to go into that, if you've done that piece of work, and it should be working, then there's something wrong internally that isn't making it work. So it's not a case of they're underperforming because, we haven't tried. It's about changing the dials on things to see how it could work, and actually looking at that main brand and saying, okay, they excelled in this area because they did this. Is that going to work or not?
So I guess I'm picking up here, like, the amount of time that you invest into looking at this before you just go, right, AI is really big. We're now creating an AI division, and that's now going to become a sub-brand.
Yeah.
If that's what I'm kind of, don't just rush into it.
Yeah. And I think it is very tempting to do that. Certainly if you've had a couple of wins before you've developed your sub-brand, you think, oh, there's money over there. I want to go and explore that. But I think before you fully commit to the sub-brand, you need to do that data and the insights and analysis that sits around it. Because otherwise, what's to say that it's not just a consultant that got really lucky with a new client and had a couple of really good wins, but actually it's nothing more than that. So before you go into it investing not just money but time and resource as well, and how it would impact the other brands, you definitely need to kind of do that ground piece.
I think that's probably one of the hardest things for a lot of recruitment businesses, to just hold back rather than just go full guns blazing into that market.
One of the things that's exciting as well, we're saying about the ones that are underperforming and the ones that are doing really well, is that I've certainly found that sub-brands allows more accountability on the teams within them as well. There's less opportunity to hide behind other people and to shy away. If you've got a website that is fully for your vertical and you're not feeding into marketing and you're not helping with blog ideas or market insights or building that value proposition for them to create content, well, your website's just going to look a bit rubbish compared to theirs. So actually senior stakeholders can say, okay, why haven't you got these resources? Why haven't you got these ebooks? Oh, because this person just completely isn't brought into the process. But actually, as somebody that is heading up that vertical, they are now a key stakeholder in that business, and they should see that as their own business, not as I come into work and this is a department that I work within. That is their own business, and they should take pride in that and be accountable. So then I think that also then works itself back into an internal conversation to, okay, the people on that desk, are they running it as if it's their own business?
And it empowers them as well.
Yeah, 100%. And they're going to get the results, right? What they put into it is what they get back from it. All of those website leads and inquiries that are coming in, all of the other different lead generation opportunities around that all comes to them, and that lines their pockets. So I think it's, yes, there is a lot of accountability there, but it's exciting because if you've got people that are ready to take that on and ready to make it work, then it's going to be great.
That's good. That sounds very sensible. How do you then, and we've had it in our business, not confuse clients and customers? 1 minute they're visiting a website that talks to them about one thing, and then they visit another website, then they visit the same website again, and either that website is now split into different divisions or sub-brands, or they're being kind of told you have to go and visit another website. How do you, and we had that, we recently moved RecWebs to Wave sites, and we had this sort of that scenario where people were looking at RecWebs and not associating it with Wave. It was like they were two different businesses. So how do you then not confuse customers and also candidates as well? Because candidates are very fickle. They can visit your site, and then if they don't find what they're looking for, or maybe they don't find the jobs that they once did because they're now set on another site, there's no guarantee they're going to go to that site. What's the plan for that? You've done all your research. You launched it. Now how do we communicate that?
So I think firstly, remember that the whole point of you doing this is that it's customer led. They are different target audiences, so they will probably welcome actually feeling that they're in their silo rather than, oh crikey, they've got engineering, they've got IT, they've got this AI thing, which one am I? If they can actually identify with what silo they sit in, that would probably be a welcome change for them. In terms of the website itself, I think if you're changing that first website, keep it very, very clear. These are the 4 verticals. Which one do you fall into? Rather than doing a massive page of information about loads of other stuff and mixing them all up again. Just keep it very, very clear. And I think if you've already had that brand and then there's going to be a change rather than you starting with a set of sub-brands, I think in terms of your communication is making sure that everything links specifically to that sub-brands pages. So we never send anybody to the homepage. That is there because it needs to exist. But all of our activities, PPC, email automation, socials, it all links back to the specific sub-brands website pages. So nobody ever really sees the home or has to make that decision. Okay, who am I? Because we've already done that for them. We know through our data who they are and where they need to be. So in those communications that you're making when you're, subbing out, if you like, we're making it clear in that journey for them that we're going to send them to our engineering site. We're not going to send them to the homepage so that then they have to think about it and make a decision. We know that they're an engineering candidate, so we're going to send them directly to that. From this day forward, they will only ever be sent to engineering stuff. Very clear. Yeah.
That's clear.
And I think that internally as well, you need to make sure that everybody is understood on that.
Yeah.
And that goes from not just sales and marketing, but all the way through to finance. Finance communicate with a lot of clients as well, and sometimes contractors. If you're working in that space, do they understand actually how you're meant to be communicating about the sub-brands? Do they have different documentation? And that's obviously a conversation internally, but every single person in that business needs to be brought in about how you're communicating your sub-brands.
And different email addresses, different telephone numbers.
So you can create different inboxes, so like water at or engineering at or IT at for those specific areas. If you're keeping hold of your parent brand, it will probably be the main domain, so at parentbrand.com. But then within that, they'll all have different email signature footers, which will link back to their specific website. It'll all be branded in their identity. So from the customer or client's perspective, they are that brand. They might be aware of some of the other sub-brands, but really that's all they care about.
Yeah. And the reason for doing this, again, trying to sort of take the mindset of a business owner that just wants to kind of move forward quickly. The danger of not doing all of the things you've just said is lost candidates, lost clients, which is equals to lost revenue. So it might seem like a small thing to make sure that your email signatures are absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
But things like that could be the difference between a client going, I don't understand, why have I been sent this?
Yeah.
Oh, clearly they don't do that anymore. And then take a call from another recruiter that's literally phoning them at the same time. So it's really important to get that right.
I think your back office function and everything that sits within that needs to be clear and needs to be ready for you to go to market. It's not just a case of changing a logo or moving websites. There's a lot more behind it. As I mentioned, the documentation. The downside that you would have, as you mentioned, is the dilution of the other brands. If you don't do it well, people think actually they're not really specialists in this sector. They're kind of just like a jack of all trades. They cover a bit of everything, and that is the opposite of what you want. The whole point of doing this is that you can show that you're specialist in those specific areas rather than you kind of just do whatever sticks.
And that's another reason not to have multiple sub brands just because you made a placement in one particular area to then suddenly create that, because the danger is you become a jack of all trades and master of none.
Yeah. And what's the business case behind it? Doing all of that research should enable you to build your business case. If you're unable to come with that business case, then you haven't done the research and it's probably just a bit of a hunch.
Yeah.
And I don't think many business owners are prepared to go just on a hunch. They'll probably say, great job on that deal, but are they prepared to change the whole business structure because of that?
And clients want to know that their recruitment business that they've engaged with is actually an expert in that area. So rather than just being an opportunist, they want to know that you are a specialist in that area. So you've got to really be very thorough with all of this. So.
And I think it'll also be obvious if you're not a specialist in that area, if you're just seeing if it works, because if you're putting out content which isn't necessarily aligned to the target audience, or maybe your tone of voice is slightly off, or the content that you're putting together is a little bit wishy-washy and you're unable to talk really specific about terms or things related to news in that industry, if it's all a bit wishy-washy, they'll probably have that assumption anyway. So I think that if you've done that research piece and you can definitely say we are a specialist, that will show throughout your communications.
I think this is really interesting, because I kind of started this conversation a little bit like, but let's just go and do it. Let's just go and launch that division, launch that sub brand, and we'll take marketing along with us as we go. But now as we've been talking, it's dawning on me a little bit more that actually that's the wrong thing to do. And let's be a bit more measured about it and get everything right, because there's a danger that you'll literally run into a brick wall and be seen as an opportunist recruiter rather than a specialist recruiter. So,
and I think it's turning it around to, you know, as a business owner yourself, I'd be like, if you want to do that's fine, but you'll probably lose more money.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you, that's brilliant. I'll definitely support you and I'll build you a marketing plan. I can't say we'll be able to fully execute or that it'll yield the results that you want. So if we do it this way, I can probably generate you more money. And through the data, you'll be able to evidence why you'd have better results. Yeah,
that's really good. That's hopefully people watching this have kind of like, maybe they started out on the same sort of thought process as I was.
Yeah.
And now hopefully, you know, coming around to your way, which seems far more successful. Just changing things up a little bit. And I know we sort of talked about brand identity before we started again. And COVID was a really, I mean, it seems like a long time ago now, you know, the lockdowns and not being allowed out, you know, it seems crazy when you actually think about it now. But we were talking about the impact of marketing during COVID and brand identity. And I know you've got some kind of thoughts on how it's changed. So I think it's just going to be really interesting to get into, because, I mean, everything changed during COVID, didn't it? But marketing wise, what impact did you see?
Gosh,
small question, right?
Well, I for my MBA, I did my dissertation on this topic, so I've definitely been in the weeds of it. I think there's probably two parts to that. The digital space, COVID accelerated digital transformation by about 7 years, and then within that, digital ads will make up 75% of media spend by 2025. That is massive.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I think when you think about brands being online, are you online? Are you visible? Are you buying into online channels? That's the first part of it. And then secondly, you have to think about the consumer. So COVID massively impacted consumers' buying habits, their attitudes to brands, and not just in the present, but also their future buying habits. And I think that brands that were able to understand that and be very agile in their marketing strategy to move along with that.
What sort of things changed?
Sustainability, local community. A lot of people decided actually want to be more sustainable. If you think the environment flourished during COVID, a lot of people really kind of got a motive with that. And so brands that were connecting that, okay, our customers now care a little bit more about the environment. What can we do to respond to that? And then the local side of things, marketing in the local community shot up. Facebook community groups and people recommending and say, I really want to buy local. Does anybody have this? So customers are actively asking, I want to buy this. Sell to me if you're a local company. So there was this huge rise, and I think bigger brands that were able to tap into that and connect and say, oh, we give back to your community. Oh, we've got this sustainability side. We're very authentic and emotive, because those are the emotions that people wanted out of COVID. Nobody could see anybody. So the brands that are able to tap it into being personal, to being personable and having those emotions were the ones that succeeded. And I think going back to when I started Aquila, that's what companies were struggling with. Certainly these really small local businesses, they were saying, I don't know what to do. I know that this is what I need to do, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to be online. So I think that the digital space and then people being able to adapt their brand to their customers' needs and future needs were the ones that survived. And unfortunately, I've had a lot of conversations with companies recently that would be like the laggards to digital transformation, if you like. They said, okay, we really need to have a look at our website and we need to be on LinkedIn and we need to have an online presence. Okay, you've got about 10 years of making up to do. So firstly, it's going to be costly because you're then having to have all of this investment at once. You're having to have the investment on your website, whether it's a new one or whether it's modifying your current one. You've then got paid ads, you've then got your social media, and all of these require resource and investment. So they're having to catch up for the last 10 years, but they're still expecting to compete win against their competitors that invested in that throughout COVID. And rightly so, those businesses are the ones that are yielding the results now because they put in that hard work. They didn't turn off their marketing during COVID. They saw them as part of the skeleton crew, and they thought, actually, if anybody can get through to our customers right now, it's our marketers.
Yeah.
Because you're calling people to try and pick up the phone. They're not at the office anymore.
Yeah.
You can't have a face-to-face meeting. And I think there was a massive shift there where actually it was marketing's time to shine.
Yeah.
It was no longer the support to sales and the back office. It came in and it said, okay, we're gonna take over. We're gonna take that baton and we're gonna get you through COVID. And then post-COVID, we're going to share it and we're going to do this together because actually we can generate more results together.
So what you're saying is really interesting with local community, sustainability, and trying to kind of, the marketing around doing the right thing, Facebook groups, whatever it was. So I had an experience about cheese during COVID, and it was exactly as you've just described. It was local cheese shop that couldn't open because no one could go. Started a delivery service. So they would send you your cheese, right? And that was quite good. Up until that point, I'd only ever bought cheese from the supermarket. Hadn't bought it from this local sort of farmers market type supplier. And I think you saw a lot of those created during COVID, whereby a lot of people took their offering that was usually in a little small shop or a pop-up or whatever, and that went online, didn't it? And then there were lots of success stories around how, some of these companies have like quadrupled in size because they're now doing mail order or online deliveries. But this example was a negative example, negative experience that I had, because we decided, yes, we wanted to buy local. Yes, it was sustainable. Yes, it wasn't a major supermarket, and it was helping the community and helping an actual entrepreneur during COVID, because I think everyone wanted to try and help.
Yes.
That all sounds great. Right up until the point we actually experienced the delivery, which was late, the interaction that we had during the delivery was really poor.
Yeah.
And it was really expensive. And the actual quality of the cheese wasn't very good. So there's still some fundamentals that you need to get right, even when the desire, like you said, is to be there, to actually buy local, buy sustainably. If some of those basics are not correct in terms of value for money and good levels of service, we didn't go back there, and we went back to what we're doing. So
I think that goes back to when you were saying that you wanted to have all those sub brands and do them all. This is the same scenario in a sense that you need to be able to fuel them all properly. And that goes back to, your business process. How is it running back office? It works exactly the same. And, if you're going to market saying that you can do X, Y, and Z, you need to be able to deliver on it, because otherwise it's going to harm you. And as you said, you haven't ordered from them. And probably if somebody else in your community was saying, oh, I'm looking for, a local cheese, you probably wouldn't suggest them. Or you might be nice and you might say, oh, there's this company, they might have changed since my experience was negative. You might be nicer because they're a local company, but you're probably not going to go around recommending them, and you're certainly not going to order from them again. So if you're not ready and you go to market, there's massive disadvantages with that.
And that's a really, really good example of it. Maybe they would, everyone was trying to just survive during COVID. So, I don't bear any grudges, but the basics of what you want, and has to be right and has to be thought through. If we're now delivering this, how are we going to deliver it? And that's a brand new business process that they didn't have to think about before, because everybody came to them.
Startups were the biggest group during COVID that registered. Startup businesses that had the biggest boom, because I think everybody was sat around thinking, oh, I know, I could do that. or there's definitely a need for me to build this really innovative plug that I've been waiting 20 years to get my hands on.
There was a lot of thinking time during COVID,
there was a huge
wasn't there?
spike in those. But I think the ones that, going back to research and data, the ones that really kind of put in the graph to say, actually, this is going to work, those are the ones that still exist and that have got really good results.
And has it, COVID was a few years ago now, thankfully. Have those changes remained, or have we started to revert back to how things were pre-COVID?
There is less day by day. People have now got back to structure and planning and kind of setting quite ambitious targets and making sure that we can stick to that. And certainly as marketers, I think that, don't hate me marketers, but I think there were a lot of people out there that would just kind of say, oh yeah, okay, we've done this, we've done that. And there was no real measurement and reporting and accountability. And that's always been quite frustrating, because I think that's always let marketing down, and known as the colouring in department, because they're not sharing, the measurements of that. What are the KPIs off the back of that? So I think now that marketing has joined in that conversation, we've had to make sure that actually there's a stronger connection with finance or C-level executives. So I think that's been a really positive change, in the fact that marketing has come into the board and it has joined the conversation, and marketers are learning how to communicate with other stakeholders, so that finance can ask them a question and marketing can respond, not just what they know the benefits are, but what finance wants to understand from it. So I think that's probably been one of the biggest positives.
And I guess, certainly in terms of the metrics and things you can now measure from a marketing perspective, it's a lot easier to have that conversation with finance that, may want to look at, facts and figures and numbers. Some of the things, historically you couldn't measure from a marketing perspective, or was very difficult to measure.
In the in my dissertation, or in the research part, I researched multiple business owners and asked them about their thoughts on marketing pre and post pandemic. And when we looked at returns specifically, a lot of them said that pre-pandemic return was just monetary, but now they know that return isn't just monetary. They know that actually there might be additional benefits that will, of course, you want to lead to a monetary return at some point, but they understand that there is more of a journey to that, and that actually having 30 people as leads and being able to talk to them, they may not be in a position to buy right now, but you're going to continue to nurture them in the funnel, and then hopefully they will drop through at some point as a conversion. They understand that more now. So I think that having that conversation has just been really valuable for everyone. Yeah.
And I think we're all quite happy with not having the world turned upside down every 5 minutes with COVID as well. You, as you said, you're allowed out, now you're not allowed out. You can get to 6, now you can't go into 6, whatever. Just as we kind of draw towards the end, I've read a lot around company brand and personal brand, and especially within recruitment, that's really really important. I think with recruiters, typically they tend to look at their personal brand very much, and maybe companies want to promote their company brand. What's the kind of strengths and weaknesses of both, and which would you, if you had to invest your money in, which of the two would you, or time in, which would you invest more in?
Personal brand.
And why?
Because going back to COVID, nobody could see anybody. Coming out of that, people crave that face-to-face communication. They want to see people. I would much rather be here face-to-face having this podcast than doing it over a screen. There are benefits to that. And I think that if you look at Elon Musk and Tesla has 22 million followers. He has 190 million. So probably more people know about Tesla through Elon Musk. So when they bring something out, he'll probably share that, and that's how they're getting out to that audience, not through Tesla's channel. And I think that traditionally there's been a bit of a mentality, certainly within sales and recruitment. We don't want to put them too much out there and show them how great they are, because they're going to get poached. They're going to start their own recruitment business. Ultimately, that's a conversation of, if you treat them well enough, they're not going to want to leave anyway. But I think we're past that now, and we actually need to show that the people within our businesses are experts and thought leaders at what they do. And when we're talking about company and personal brand, people say, oh, is there a clash? I run quite a few personal branding workshops to businesses, And I have this quite often where they say, oh, but don't I have to be the same as my company? No, you're putting the personal in personal branding. But would you have joined the company if you disagree with their values? Probably not. If I'm really into my sustainability, I'm probably not going to go and work for an oil rig company. It's just not where I want to be.
Yeah.
So I think when you're thinking about, do I align to my company? Well, yes, because you opted to work with them. So there's obviously shared values there somewhere. And in your personal brand, you need to be different. Nobody in your business is the same, and that's why your business thrives. I think you might have a consultant that's been trying to knock down the door of a prospect for a year. It's not working. You've got somebody else with a different personal brand. They come in, they've got a completely different approach. They might be able to build up a little bit of a rapport over shared values with that prospect, and then you can close the deal. And that's not saying that the other person isn't any good. It's just that their personal brand connected more with the prospect.
Yeah.
So I think actually using them to the company's advantage rather than saying that client's not going to work with us. Well, actually, is it a case that maybe just that person hasn't resonated as well with them? So I think nurturing personal brand and educating people as to what it is, it's not an ego-driven activity. It's a competitive advantage. And I think we need to get away from the, oh, did you see that person's video? Oh, it was so cringe. It was so bad. You're all talking about that person's video. You know where they work. You know what they offer. And who else knows that? Your competitors.
Yeah.
So when they do have a need, they're going to go to that person. And within that, yes, there is a company that props it up. Yes, the company brand plays a part. They'll be sharing content. If we're talking about LinkedIn, they'll be sharing company branded content to help fuel their personal brand, and vice versa. But I think at the minute, certainly for recruitment and sales people, personal brand is where we need to be educating and spending a lot of investment.
So you're pushing the personal brand supported by the company brand.
Yeah. So for example, if you were going to put something out today, so say you wanted to do a picture of this podcast, for example, you might go out and say, okay, I'm going to put something out with my thoughts as Dave on there. And then your marketing team say, okay, that's great. Let us know when you do that, because we're going to share that and then we're going to add some insight, but from a company perspective. And then 2 days' time, they might say, okay, we're going to put another picture out about that podcast that you did with Jade. Can you like and share and add your commentary? So it's kind of like, a two-way street. And actually between you, you're having that ripple effect of reach.
Yeah.
Again, it comes back to the conversation, communicating with each other internally to get the data in and to have better results.
These guys hate it because I always put things out that I'm not supposed to put out like a couple of days before they plan to put them out. So I normally
communication.
I normally get my wrist slapped saying, why have you put that? Why have you posted that? But brilliant. Okay. So people want to find out more about Branded by Aquila.
Yep.
They go to brandedbyaquila.com.
Yep.
So they can find and reach you there.
Yeah, 100%.
Super. Well, good luck with it.
Thank you.
It's already motoring, clearly, not bumbling, motoring. So really, really looking forward to seeing how that kind of grows.
Thank
you for sharing all of that information with us. I think I'm really, really pleased that we kind of got to that point where I was thinking, no, I just want to go and do it. And you're like, well, hold on, just let's look at these things. And actually, it's really valuable. And I think that would be really, really helpful for people who are maybe of that same mindset of let's just go and do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and I think anybody, marketers or business leaders, any questions around those topics, just to have a conversation, because every business is different. What they want to commit in terms
just
of
get in
resource
touch with
is
you.
different. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to have a conversation about. I enjoy talking about this stuff. It's not difficult for me to do that, and I think if I can share my experience or share my insight, at least for somebody to go away and think about it differently, that just gives them more insight before they commit time and investment.
Yeah, perfect, super. Well, thanks very much for coming on. Thanks for everyone listening, watching.
Thank you.
Hope you found it useful. And thanks to marketing. You guys are the best.